Welcome to The Get Together. This is a show about the nuts and bolts of community building, and I am your host, Bailey Richardson, a community researcher at People & Company.
I'm Kevin Huynh, also a partner at People & Company, a community researcher and strategist.
Each episode, Kev and I interview people who have built communities about just how they did it. How did they get the first people to show up? How did they grow to thousands more members?
Yes.
Now, some of you are tuning in, or you may know, that Kevin was the very first employee at CreativeMornings. Back in 2011, a 23-year-old baby Kev, fresh off his mechanical engineering degree from Berkeley, passed on.
Go Bears.
Go Bears. Yeah. My dad went there. I'll give it a thumbs up. He passed on a fancy Google job. Sorry, Mom and Dad.
Sorry, insurance.
And then you packed your bags and moved across the country. And on the first day of work at CreativeMornings, when Kevin walked into the office, sat down at his computer, he was greeted by an inbox full of emails from people asking to start their own CM chapters in their cities. Now, at that time, there were only 4 cities with the CreativeMornings: New York, Zurich, San Francisco, and Los Angeles. By the time Kevin left, 3.5 years later, he had helped take the CreativeMornings organization from 4 chapters to over 104. Today, though, is not about you, Kevin. Yay. Today, we are going to talk to the folks who are running CreativeMornings right now. Kev, tell us, who did we chat with today?
So today we spoke to our friends Lisa Cifuentes and Kyle Baptista. So Kyle is the current COO at CreativeMornings HQ, and he's also a former CreativeMornings Toronto host, which is rad. And then Lisa is the head of community there. So she's really in charge of cultivating the community, reviewing chapter applications, and she talks more about it in the episode. If you're not familiar with CM, a CreativeMornings is a free breakfast lecture. Kyle talks a bit about the origin story, but just imagine you show up on a Friday. There's a free talk from a creative person. It could be a chef, it could be a designer, it could be a founder, and volunteers host these free lectures in now almost 200 cities all around the world. We wanted to talk to CreativeMornings and dig into how they seek out and vet their volunteer organizers, those local leaders, as well as what support they provide to them in order to, help them cultivate their own local communities.
Yeah. And on that lens, Kev, you forge some of these resources, tools, support offerings that you guys give organizers. Yeah. And I'm wondering what stood out to you from talking to Kyle and Lisa about what they do now.
Yeah. The thing that stood out to me, looking back, I feel like my work in the early days, there was a lot of almost coaching organizers. It was like maybe headquarters knew best because, Tina, the founder, had created the New York event. We were still doing it. We've been doing it longer than anybody else. And we kind of thought we knew best maybe. And we're putting together those original resources, right? That template or that handbook. And now talking to Lisa and Kyle, the community of CreativeMornings organizers eagerly helps each other. They're eagerly translating marketing materials into different languages. They're sharing their best practices. They're sharing tips on how to find partners. And headquarters' role has evolved to really just reflect back the best things, see how the community is helping each other, pick those out, listen, and then make sure those are readily available to everybody. And it's very much of a farmer, a cultivator, what's really going on? How do we just help more of that goodness happen? And it was so cool to hear Lisa and Kyle talk about that evolution of CM, and the community is awesome. And yeah.
Yeah, they know what they're doing.
They do.
A lot of best practices in here.
Yes.
All right, let's jump in.
Let's do it. So right now context for the listeners, we're right now in Brooklyn. Are we in Boerum Hill?
We're in Boerum Hill.
We're in Boerum Hill?
Yeah.
Boerum Hill, CreativeMornings HQ, Kyle, COO, CreativeMornings, Lisa Cifuentes, Kyle Baptista, Lisa Cifuentes, head of community at CreativeMornings, Ginger, Chief Dog, Chief Dog. What kind of dog is Ginger?
She's a mutt from Grenada. She's a rescue.
I don't even know what that means.
Yeah. She's a street dog. She's a mix. Oh, hi. I'm talking about you. From Grenada, brought to New York about a year ago.
What's your native language in Grenada? Is it Spanish?
It's Spanish,
Oh.
but I've tried with my limited Spanish to see if she was fine, but I haven't gotten anything out of it.
Okay.
But my Spanish is also non-existent, so
Don't worry, Bailey's fluent.
great.
I can speak with her
Lisa.
later.
No, wait,
I think Lisa.
We're all fluent, not you. Okay, so I just want to kick off with like origin stories. Creative Mornings today, I checked the website. 196 cities
196.
and counting. I don't even know what's on deck. There's probably applications to review from hosts, but that means like in presumably 196 cities around the world, monthly free creative lectures. Kyle, can you tell me a bit about like how Creative Mornings got started?
Yeah, absolutely. It was 10 years and a few months ago. So, this year was a major milestone. The 10-year mark was pretty significant. Our founder and CEO, Tina Roth-Eisenberg, was having trouble finding like-minded individuals in New York and finding out where they were, how to befriend them and work with them and just kind of get to know them. So she created a meetup in at the time, her co-working space called Studio Mates, and decided that she would invite a bunch of people to come together and just kind of hang out and have a little meetup for the creative community in New York. It was Creative Mornings, but it didn't have a speaker. It was a gathering in her 6th floor co-working space, so the elevator was broken. And I believe the food didn't show up, perhaps, is the other challenge that she had. So it was kind of a
Big
mix and
things start
mingle.
small.
Yeah, exactly. Big things start small. Turned into a bit of a mix and mingle. Upon reiterating the event for the second month in October 2008, Tina decided to focus the event around a speaker. So kind of have a central element around that meetup and that gathering to kind of bring purpose, bring meaning, hopefully a little bit of inspiration to the community, and kind of grease the wheels a little bit on their interactions with each other and help them make those face-to-face connections a little more easily. And the rest is history.
Yeah, and I met you when, I think when you were applying to take over the Toronto chapter. How did you get involved in Toronto?
Yeah, so Toronto wasn't actually a chapter yet, and I followed Tina and I followed Creative Mornings on Twitter, and I was a creative working in Toronto, and I had aspirations of bringing a chapter there. And I think it was Creative Mornings' 3rd birthday when they created a microsite, which we went and found on, I forgot where it was set up, maybe Tumblr or something like that.
Wait, which microsite are we talking?
The what should Creative
That you
Mornings...
created.
The Happy Birthday one.
Happy Birthday
that
microsite.
Yoko and I hacked together, and I think slept on the floor that night.
Yeah.
In the studio. Yoko's my partner. She was working, well, I mean, not at the time.
Yeah, I was going to say, how did that really happen?
We can get back to another order.
That's a whole other episode.
It's mostly about you.
So I found this microsite, and it said, what should Creative Mornings do next? It was kind of like, what's your birthday wish for Creative Mornings? And I wrote I submitted to the site, my birthday wishes for Creative Mornings to come to Toronto. And I went and did, Command Control F and saw who else wrote Toronto on that page. And we all kind of started following each other.
Whoa. I do not know this.
Yeah, this is the
I love
origin
this
story.
story.
We all started following each other. We had a meeting, like, let's get together, let's start a chapter, let's make this happen. And then, I'm still close to some of the people that were in that circle. And we were all strangers from Twitter. And we got together and we said, let's do it. Let's file an application. So we went to file our application, and I believe it was Kevin that said, somebody beat you by 2 weeks. Like, somebody applied for a Toronto chapter like 2 weeks ago.
While you guys were making friends.
Yeah,
Someone else.
Well, you were forming the super team. I gave you the first person to walk in the door.
Barus, who was a wonderful, amazing founding host, started the chapter, and I was just a volunteer from the early days. So I was there from day one. I was checking people in on the first ever Creative Mornings Toronto, which was November 2011. They just celebrated the 7th anniversary recently. And that's how I got involved.
Yeah, and now what do you do at headquarters?
So I'm the COO, Chief Operating Officer.
I'm the old Kyle.
Yeah.
It's how I usually introduce
I'm the new
myself.
Kevin, which people still call me that, and it hurts, but it's fine.
Fine, also.
I operationalize Creative Mornings HQ and a little bit of like Tina's vision for the organization. So making sure we have the funding and the budget to do what we need, and the funding we need to support our community, the tools and resources we need for our operations at HQ, a lot of the strategy and support for some of the various products and things that we're doing, and just supporting our very highly competent HQ team in content and partnerships and community and the Creative Guild and field trips and some of our other products.
Yeah.
So, by working in support to the team.
Operationalizing the operation.
Yeah.
And Lisa, I met you at the first Creative Morning Summit. Did we meet before that?
No, that was our first meeting.
Yeah.
I, at that point, had been just attending Creative Mornings as a regular attendee because I loved it so much. And then one day I remember Sally, a former Creative Mornings employee, got up on stage and said that they needed volunteers for this big event that was coming up. And at the time I had no idea what it was. So I put my hand up, of course, because it was Creative Mornings. And I think a few weeks later, I came to the office because that was when the 2014 Creative Mornings Summit happened with all of the organizers from around the world. And that's how I got involved. I started just volunteering at that event.
Yeah. I love how there's this theme of both of you got involved in like small ways before like the big way. It wasn't like I was on Indeed.com looking for a job and Creative Mornings head of community. It was like varying layers of involvement.
Yeah.
What are you up to as head of community today at CMHQ?
So now, as you mentioned, we're 196 chapters. So me and 2 other people on the community team are responsible for all of the applications that come in, because in order to run a Creative Mornings chapter, there is an application process that you lovingly put in place.
I want to ask more about that. Yeah, keep going.
Okay, we'll get to that. So our role really is to vet the applicants that come through to make sure that they're the right fit for the community. And we look for certain criteria, whether it's someone who is humble, someone who's really good at shining the light on their community, someone who really wants to bring their community together, and ultimately just make their city better.
Yeah.
So those are some of the things that we're looking for. And then when we approve them, we begin the onboarding process of introducing them to the rest of the organizers around the world. From there, people become part of the community once they start hosting the events in their city. And our job really is to make sure that they have everything that they need on the ground locally, but also that they feel tied to the global organization. That they feel like they can reach out to not only us, but to organizers in other cities to chat about event logistics, partnerships, speakers. The whole thing about it being a community is that they feel like they belong to it. So we're just here to manage that and make sure that it's happening.
How many organizers do you think you've interviewed by now? This is one of those like Google like estimate questions for
Over
your job.
100. Maybe around 100 actually, because when I came on board, we were at 105 chapters.
Yeah.
And it was Tel Aviv. That was the first chapter that I onboarded. And now we're at 196.
Yeah.
So maybe it's more than that, given that we also have handover applications as well.
Yeah.
And we also don't
What's
approve.
a handover application? This
You
is
know,
Bailey. I don't work at Creative Mornings. I'll be asking the dumb questions.
You know the city handover? Just kidding.
Oh, I get it. Okay, so someone has to apply if they want to take over an. Okay, all right,
Yeah.
got it.
And actually, sometimes someone is nominated from the former team who is stepping away from the chapter. But we still do an interview with them as well. So ballpark, I would say 150.
Whoa.
Yeah, it's a lot of interviews.
So what's something that you've learned from those first couple interviews to now having like, evaluated talk to these passionate people that want to host Creative Mornings 150 hours later?
I would say sometimes it's really easy to know whether or not someone is a right fit within the first 5 minutes of an interview. And I think a lot of it just comes down to a gut feeling, an instinct. And of course, I should say there is a lot of pre-work that goes into vetting the applicant even before we schedule the interview.
Yeah.
We've already seen their written application.
Yeah, tell us about the application process.
It's very thorough, I would say, and it's not easy.
Just a giant wall.
I loved how you described
Very
it
short
once.
room.
That you purposely made it hard because it acts as a filter. So people who aren't willing to put in the time and effort clearly wouldn't be able to execute 12 events a year. So luckily that has been put in place. And it's a written application that asks people what their vision is for the Creative Mornings chapter in their city, why they need one, who is on their team, what kind of speakers they have in mind. It really just allows us to see what the chapter would look like if they were to be the host. So from there, they also have to film a video that is, I would say, pretty produced.
Yeah.
It's wise that they have a videographer on the team already so that they can shoot a high quality video and showcase their city. And not only that, it really helps us to see who their teammates will be. We want to see that the person has made the effort to talk to people in their community, get people on board, get people excited. What kind of influence does this person have within their own local community? So they put together this video, we review it, and if we feel it meets that level of professionalism and that community spirit, we will schedule an interview with them. Getting that far already is a very good sign. I would say the biggest challenges that we've had in the past when we're selecting a host is when we have multiple excellent videos and applications from the same city.
Yeah.
Because then in that case, we have to decide of 2 or 3 really well done applications who would be the best fit. And the best case scenario in that situation is selecting one, mostly because logistically it's easier for us to only have one liaison with the city, but then for them to collaborate as a team.
I avoided that situation with Kyle. I just decided, take the first person, and then we don't have to pick between two.
Lisa, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
So I feel like at Instagram, picking suggested users was the closest thing to picking organizers. And one of the things I also tried to look for was people's intent. Like, are they on this platform just to kind of get followers and build a career?
Absolutely.
That was sort of intuitive to me. And it sounds like you guys are doing that too.
Yeah.
Why? Like, what's the argument for needing someone to not be in it for themselves? Or, how could you be in it for yourself? Because you do gain things for being a Creative Mornings organizer. But yeah, just what's the why there?
Well, I'd say we're really protective of this community, and people trust Creative Mornings because we are protective. When you go to an event, whether it's in New York or Bangkok or Kuala Lumpur, you're showing up and there's no catch. You're going to hear an inspiring talk. You're going to meet people who are interested, engaged, kind. I think that's really the underlying thread within our community. Everyone is just really nice. And I think if you start to model that with people who are starting the chapter because they want to get something out of it for themselves, you attract a different type of audience and a different type of community.
And that energy ripples through the rest of the community and impacts them too. So we're as protective of the community you're joining as much as we are of the overall product of Creative Mornings. And I think the end result is we want a consistent experience of attendees around the world, which is, in 2018, it's going to be almost 250,000 people who came to our events this year. We want all of them coming to the event and the takeaway being that it felt like a gift. And to have that consistent experience across the world.
Yeah, it seems to always feel so generous. There's no catch. It feels like a gift. And it's almost like you are picking someone who has generous intent so that they will make those design decisions and how they put an event on naturally. It's like, oh, you'll carry this into the way you put this whole thing on. That's really cool. I like that.
I'm trying to think back to when I was putting together that application, like how much of this was the grand design or more like, I wonder what should be in an application. Here goes, and I kind of ended up with something that was really hard. I realize now that there are elements of show not tell. Because you can ask people, tell us who your team is, but by having to put together the video, they have to go through those actions of actually rallying their team to go do the thing. And that is one step further. That requires spending some of your social capital. That requires really working together, which is what you're going to have to do to put on the event. Yeah, the application is like that mini process started.
Look at you, savant moving, Kevin.
Yeah. It's like, I think this is the feeling of the last three years after leaving. I was like, I just got to go figure out what I was doing, why it maybe made sense, where did I go wrong?
Yeah, I would say also the application just really sets the expectation, because I think a lot of people have this idea of what it takes to run a chapter, and when they see it, when they attend another event, a lot of our organizers are so good at what they do, they make it look easy. And so when you're actually doing the application, it shows you that it's actually a lot of work that goes into it, and there's a lot that happens behind the scenes that maybe people don't realize, but you're planning an event every single month.
For hundreds and thousands of people, or sometimes, right? And it's like lots of people are coming. Yeah.
I think it's setting expectations too, because you go through that application process, and when you get into the first event and you see the grind that's involved and everything, all the aspects, catering, AV, speaker vetting and training, volunteer management, sponsorship. So you kind of there's no surprises. You kind of know what you're going to get.
It's kind of like setting people up for success rather than, oh my gosh, I had no idea what I was getting into.
Yeah.
It's like, let's put you on sort of this first training wheels experience, but it's still going to be hard going through the application and then that first event. a little bit more ready.
Part of it that's helped us maintain this system from the early days through now is that we've never had requirements to meet a certain threshold of attendees or chapters or community. Our partners invest in us because they like who we are and what we do and understand our reach and scope. But we don't have to reach 200 chapters by the end of the year, and we're comfortable being at 196 until the next wave of applications come in.
So you feel like if there were like hard growth goals, like, you know what, end of 2019, we want to be at 300 chapters, that would put you in a position where you might be incentivized to sacrifice some of the like quality or go out more aggressively to find hosts that might not be the best for the community.
Yeah. I would say there was, I think, only one exception to this, but we've never really gone out and solicited applications from people.
Yeah.
For someone to apply, their intent has to come from themselves.
Yeah.
We're not going to ask for it because then it's not effective. People have to have the desire to do this.
Yeah. What's really hard for an organizer? Like, what do they struggle with? You both work as organizers. You put on an event in New York. Kyle, you were running Toronto for X years. How many years?
3 years.
3 years. And then you're working with so many organizers today. What's really tough for them?
Partnerships, number one challenge for our chapters.
Can you break down what a partnership is too? Because there's like at least two types. And,
Right. So the traditional, we use the word partnerships as like an active engagement with essentially what are sponsors, but they are financial, they're in kind, they're any aspect of a chapter needing to ask for something. Chapters aren't allowed to pay speaker fees, so they need to ask their speakers to waive fees if those are a thing. And we put a lot of onus on the chapter, and the events have to be free. You can't charge for tickets, but they can
and
be.
breakfast is free.
And
Someone's
breakfast,
make
exactly.
coffee, breakfast. Yeah.
So the expectations are high, like a speaker that is willing to be recorded and not receive speaker fees for presenting to a community, at least coffee, if not coffee and breakfast. And we don't give them the financial resources. We give them a lot of tools and a lot of assets and a global ticketing system, and our global partners provide the tools that they use, but they need to figure out the rest on their own. And there's a lot of different scenarios for doing this. A lot of our chapters receive only in-kind donations. Others will connect their financial partners directly to their vendors, and they'll pay through, so they don't actually deal with any money. And then a smaller portion of chapters set themselves up as nonprofits or LLCs, or run it through their creative business or their agency to manage what's really a complex financial system that's dealing with $20, $30, $40, $50,000 a year at a single chapter to put on events at this scale. And the average event size is 120 people, so these are big events across the board. The chapters have to build that system.
I will say, though, as part of what the community team does is to provide resources so that when new chapters are looking for partners, it's not as daunting. So we provide them resources, templates,
Can you say some of what those are? Yeah.
So some of the tools that we use to connect the organizers to each other are Slack and a private Facebook group. So people will go into those channels to have conversations about how they've done it successfully in the past. People are very willing to share with each other what's worked for them and what hasn't. And then we will be monitoring all of that chatter and then taking anything that is shared and providing it back to everyone else who maybe missed that. Yeah. So some of our chapters have put together these incredible decks on why someone should support Creative Mornings in their city. It would have stats, it would have information on the audience, reasons why they should support the chapter, and they've designed it. It looks really good, it's very visual, and they will willingly share that with other organizers in different cities who are just starting out, and then people will copy each other and replicate it, and it's encouraged.
I just want to clap for that. Best practice alert right there. Reuse what your community builds.
Yeah.
Thread it through.
I love that because I think in the early days when I was putting together resources, I was getting some information and tips from organizers and kind of putting them in, but it really felt like here's the PDF, here's this, and here are the resources versus this seeing what other people make and reflecting it back. It felt a little bit like seeding the process versus now, those organizers, they know best, right? They're the ones on the ground. They're the ones knocking their head against the wall, trying to find that next partner. Yeah. And when something works for them, they can speak to it and describe it so much better than someone who just hypothetically thinks what would work, could.
Yeah. And so we've started collecting everything and putting it in Dropmark, which is how we share a lot of the resources. So when you go in, you log in, you can see partnership decks from whoever has submitted them, whoever has shared them.
Yeah. Probably in different languages too, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And it's everything from graphic assets. Chapters will share their Illustrator and Photoshop files to the community. So they have a consistent calendar of calls to action for their community. Like, don't forget to register, cancel your ticket if you can't make it, join the wait list, and tell your friend, bring a friend. So when they create assets, they're so scalable to every chapter. And we have very talented illustrators and designers and people within our chapter community that create these custom for their chapter. And we ask them to share the source files, and they very willingly do. So we have a massive library of graphics assets and things like that.
This is one of those things that I feel like is unique to the Creative Mornings community. I started working with an education foundation called EdCamp, which is made up of K through 12 teachers that has like chapter model everywhere, and their fluency with Adobe Creative Suite, with even PowerPoint, with these tools to customize things, just isn't as much there. And I realized that with the Creative Mornings community, not everywhere, but for the most part, there's going to be a team member who's probably a graphic designer. There's going to be a team member who's like fluent with this stuff. And that ability to like customize and create and share resources more quickly, I think even helps like propel what CM does.
Also, just to add to that, so chapters are not only sharing the regular resources with each other, and the regular meaning the essentials, the basics, the partnership stuff, for example, but now they're coming up with really good ideas and also sharing it with each other. So for example, our chapter in St. Pete, Florida, they're all about sustainability and being a zero waste chapter, which is just incredible. If you think about, they're having events every single month and they're completely zero waste.
Wow.
Yeah. So one of the things that they started doing, they created a mug library. So at every event, they encourage people to not only bring their mugs, but they'll have a bucket, I don't know, like a tray of mugs that they allow people to borrow for the event. And so now a lot of our other chapters are doing it as well. So it's like they shared the idea, they shared the graphics for it, and now it's spreading.
Yeah. That's right. It also really fits like CM's vibe. The like, it's homey. It's more of like a living room lecture versus like some whatever $1,000 conference ticket thing.
I think that's a Quaker thing. I've been to a Quaker meeting and they do a lot of the like library resources, so you can show up and just like grab somebody else's thing anytime you're at a meeting that like someone's left behind.
I'm thinking about the college
love those
bar.
Quakers.
The college bar where you can like pay to have your beer signed and it's like hanging out.
Is that what happens at Cal?
That's a thing at Cal.
At Stanford we only had wine glasses. It's a Chardonnay or Merlot glass. Sorry, anyway, move on for me.
What support that you provide to organizers are you most proud of, just like individually?
I would say the emotional support, really.
Queen.
Tell us about that.
Anyone can provide decks and PDFs and tutorials. I think what makes Creative Mornings different is that we're a very empathetic group of people that work here, and when we hear stories from the community, we feel it. I mean, I have conversations with people that are not only about their chapters, but about their personal lives as well. And I don't think that's something that you can really teach or replicate really necessarily. It's just, I think, something that's really intrinsic to the people who are attracted to Creative Mornings. And I think especially, for example, Kyle having experience as a host himself, like, what it's actually like to be on the ground. You have that lens of, you've been there yourself. I've never been a host, but I still feel like a deep connection with the people who are on the ground running their chapters. And I feel like I think Kyle says it so well. We are in service to the community. And I wholeheartedly believe that.
That's great.
Yeah, anyone who's listening that knows Lisa is just like, man, they hit the biggest jackpot ever. I'd be calling you every day. I'd be like, Lisa, I want to talk to you. It's me again.
Well, I think I enjoy it so much. I just really like connecting with people and being really just a friend or that big sister type, or almost like the parents of Creative Mornings.
That was one of the questions I want to ask. That was like, what do you see as the role for headquarters? Even if you chose one of those titles, it could be like, are we like the quarterback? Are we like sort of the sponsor of this community? Or are we like the older sibling for it? And I love how you're really tapping into the, like, it's not just like we give these folks these plans and they do their thing. It's a lot more than that.
I always see it as like a big sister role. At least for myself personally, that's just the feeling I get from it.
Kyle?
It's a good question. I don't know. I want to say parental, but I think I agree with sibling. Like, the thing I really love is that we run HQ. This is the only paid staff in the world here in New York, but we run our local chapter too. Like I think it's one thing to have volunteered for a chapter and work here, but we also every month, deal with catering and speaker questions and things that show up late and the things that fall through, just like our chapters do. So we have the same experiences. So I think it makes it more of a sibling relationship. Something that's like, we're also in this space, we're experiencing and doing this with you. And I think I can speak from chapter experience. It means a lot to me that the staff weren't just kind of managing things that felt far away. I saw when their event was, and I saw their event photos, and I could go and look at them to see what they were doing differently and learn from them, just like you could with any other chapter. So where you experience it every month, and we're on the ground doing it as well, which I think means a lot.
That's awesome. I hadn't reflected as much on how important and substantial it was that headquarters, that team continues to run a New York Creative Mornings chapter. I think that removes some of that probability that you get too far away from like what the real heart of this thing is. You still remember what it feels like to like have breakfast come late, have a sponsor drop out, to have the sound guy not there, like you still know that, and that keeps you more grounded in what the priorities are and how to like help an organizer.
Yeah, we're planning the events. You got
one next week.
after this, actually.
Yeah. What's coming up next week?
We have this musician named James Sills who's actually flying in from Wales.
Whoa.
Which normally, we would actually select a New York-based speaker. This was a special occasion because we wanted to end the year with something really heartwarming and fulfilling. And so we decided that we wanted to do it by having everyone sing together. So James will be leading us all in communal singing.
Rad. It's awesome. So great.
I'm really excited.
You didn't ask Kyle what he was most proud of, the support that you were most proud of. I'm curious.
I would say the same. I think, again, reflecting on my time as a host, confidence was probably the biggest barrier. I felt like an imposter creative, and now I was facilitating the largest creative community in my city. I had a lot of imposter syndrome, a lot of confidence issues around that. And what I felt from HQ was just kind of like overwhelming support, like, you got this, we believe in you, like, we have your back. And if any doubt came from me or the community, which it never did, I had that to fall back on. So that's the role, just kind of reassuring our hosts. Like, they come to us with tough decisions and, may or may not be looking for advice, but they just, sometimes you just need a sounding board and to know that things will be okay.
Yeah.
Whatever choice you make is the right one because you're the right person to make that decision.
Yeah. Such an important point. Bailey asked me, as we were running through questions, asked me this question yesterday, what were you proud of from your time? And I was thinking, I felt like my role there was like sandbox builder. It's like there wasn't as much of a sandbox yet for organizers, and let's make that structure a bit more clear, what tools are there. But if I go into why that's helpful, why that's important, it's that kind of emotional support or confidence aspect of it, that you've been approved because we agree you are the person to represent Orlando, Bangkok, wherever, and go do this thing, go build that community. You can. And we're your big brother or big sister.
Your cheerleader.
In that journey.
I wanted to ask, one thing we haven't talked about too much is the fact that there are people speaking all these different languages in all these different cultures, and it sounds like kind of the resource library is helpful with that. Anyone who's speaking a language that's Cyrillic can read the same things, but can you guys tell me how did you build as a capacity as a headquarters to support extremely different cultures or people who really don't speak the same language as you guys? Are there any issues there, or what have you guys built or done to help those people?
I'll take this one. To be
Trading
honest,
glances.
Well, not that English is, we don't have it anywhere that it's an actual requirement, but it obviously helps because that's the language that we speak here at HQ.
Yeah.
So we do have organizers where English is not their first language, so we've even done application interviews with a translator, and it's been fine. It's still manageable, it's doable. And then in terms of the resources that we provide, on our website, we still use Locale app to do translations. But I would say, personally, I'm sorry, I feel like this is a bad answer, but I don't actually think about it too much. I just feel like people
people figure it out.
Yeah, they figure it out.
Yeah. I mean, web translation resources
Yeah.
also, compared to a few years ago,
Yeah.
everything on the internet is immediately translatable, and the quality is so much higher
Yeah.
now.
Exactly.
So I feel like when I was working on this with Instagram, we had a Japanese user manually translate our entire app just because he like raised his hand and offered to do it in the early days.
Yeah.
But now these things are just like extremely, like they're fundamental building blocks of the internet. So
Yeah.
I feel like people can overcome
Yeah.
a lot of this stuff in written correspondence at
Yeah.
least. Yeah.
Well, that interaction with Locale app, I think, is interesting. So that's like I don't know the right word for it, but it's like a plugin or a framework that allows for volunteer translators to translate different parts of the Creative Mornings website,
Oh, great.
as well as
Yeah.
like
There
top
you go.
titles and other things. There's still like a community of volunteers, whether those be maybe organizers or others. That,
There are still people who do it.
yeah, that plugin will translate it to, to Spanish, to Portuguese in Brazil, as well as Portuguese for like Portugal.
And I think the website serves 11 languages with Locale or something like that. That it is all volunteer-led and translated. That they kind of built in the infrastructure and the translations to make that site function. And I think their events are done in 15 or
Yeah.
more languages. And I think the autonomy of running a chapter really carries through into you have full control over the communications and every interaction point with your community, except the website because that's centralized, but you control all the other interactions, so you can do it in whatever language you want. And we don't need to provide the resources because you're creating that content anyways. So there's just, I think the autonomy is a part of the reason why it's not so much of a struggle. Having said that, like we could always be doing more. We could be providing our handbook and some of our back-end products in different languages and stuff. But,
Yeah. No, I think the autonomy answer is a really interesting one. It's like you can't guess all of the little things that are going to be different from place to place to place, even if you run a chapter in New York.
Yeah.
And so the way to design for that evolution and specificity is to give people control.
Yeah.
And and I guess bring on and onboard people who are really self-motivated and
Yeah.
kind of can take
Yeah.
the cake and run
And
with it.
some of our chapters are really good at sharing those resources again with each other. So, for example, our Montevideo or Mexico chapters, both of them will translate everything into Spanish and then send it out to the rest of the community because there are other Spanish-speaking chapters that could use it.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
And the people in Spain are like, this is not.
Any mistakes we might have made in the early days? I think about this. Like, is there anything that if you could teleport to 2012, you'd be like,
Kevin, you fool!
I wish you did this a little bit different. Like we've had to unravel this. I mean, no regrets, but yeah. Anything come to mind?
I wouldn't call them mistakes. There's an opportunity we have with the new website that's collected every talk, and when that new website launched, Kevin and the team here at the time uploaded every existing talk up until that point to the site.
I've been meaning to give you this hard drive that I have, which is like the original 500 or something
Oh
videos
gosh, the
we
first 500
downloaded.
talks.
Yeah, off of Vimeo, like individually from the account.
Yikes.
But that was great. But that site unlocked so much potential in the community, unlocked the opportunity for mailing lists and user accounts, of which there's 500,000 now, and we have
Yeah.
hundreds of thousands of subscribers to the mailing list. That site really kind of like elevated, I think, is what catalyzed a lot of the growth in Creative Mornings. And it was only 5 years ago. Like that site launched 5 years ago, and Creative Mornings is 10 years old. So it's just interesting, like an opportunity to. You could say this in hindsight. Like we should have had that from day one.
Yeah.
Obviously, that's like obscene
But
suggestion.
and you're talking about like the ability to pool resources. Like these folks are building communities all over the world, and like if you start centralizing some of that data and information, and you're able to make connections as well as organize people more effectively. And I don't know if we thought about it that way, but it does make so much sense that like if you are able to start bringing that stuff together, you have more that the headquarters is able to do on behalf of the community.
Right, exactly.
One last question, which is, certain Creative Mornings organizers that I met. I mean, I think about the first summit and like seeing. I don't know if I'd seen you in person before that. Maybe you
think so. Yeah.
But like you and others, it was just so impactful to me. And some of those folks like remain friends today. Can you tell me about a particular organizer from the community that's I don't know, that's left an impact on you, or that, anything stick out with like someone, not to pick favorites, but
that's
just,
such a tough question. I don't know if I could answer that diplomatically. They're all my favorites.
Yeah.
It's a required answer. I will speak to the biggest impact like a person in the community has had for me. So at the 2014 summit, we'd been running Creative Mornings in Toronto for 3 years at that point. You know, we were pretty deep into it, and we thought we had to figure it out to a degree. But you know, we're so on the ground, focused on our monthly event and the experience that our community has. I don't think I'd been to another city's event by that point. Still, there weren't any close to us, but I'd never really gone up to 40,000 feet to take a bigger picture look at how we're serving our community. And the first summit, the biggest kind of like, you could call it an aha moment, but for me it was like pull my hair out, kind of like, I can't believe I hadn't thought of this. So frustration and euphoria all mixed in together. And it was our Atlanta host, Blake, who spoke. There was my favorite part of every one of these summits, this biennial event that brings together all of our global organizers, is the opportunity to hear from the community. And we select people across the breadth of our community to speak about something they're doing really well that we kind of want to highlight and role model to the rest of the community because we're really proud of it.
Yeah.
It's great. Blake talked about how he opens every Creative Mornings Atlanta with a game show. And the intention that he sets with that, and the mood and the energy that like overcomes the community. And I think my jaw, my mouth was agape, and it just blew my mind.
That room was on fire.
Yeah, absolutely, it was. Yeah. And it helped his presentation style. It's also very energetic, but I remember coming away from that saying, like, we've been doing it all wrong. Like, nothing has made me want to go back and change everything the way that moment has. And every summit and every experience, I've had so many more of those takeaways. Like, wow, this is so true. And this is articulating something that I've always felt but I've never really done.
Yeah.
And that all comes from our community. Like, I think our best ideas come from the chapters, and we just reflect them back to them.
Yeah. Awesome. I'm tapped out. That was a wonderful conversation. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
Thank you for asking us.
Yeah.
If you want to get involved with Creative Mornings, maybe bring it to your part of the world, you can visit CreativeMornings.com. No spaces, very simple, CreativeMornings.com. Over at the website, you can also watch Creative Mornings talks, subscribe to their podcast, and sign up for the CM newsletter.
Yeah. If you want to find out more about us, People and Company, visit our website, peopleand.company. It's not a .com, it's a .company. We're writing a book right now, a handbook on how to cultivate a community, what we've learned from conversations like this one with Lisa and Kyle and others. You can sign up to get notified about that on our website, or just say hi, just say something to us.
Reach out.
Whatever, reach out. Break that
and touch the
listener
void.
wall. Reach out and touch someone. Send us an email at hi@peopleand.company.
Last thing, review us.
Oh yeah,
please.
if you like this, review us.
Review
Leave a
us.
review in the podcast
Please
store of your
review
choice,
us.
in the podcast land of your choice.
Would it be more effective if I just say, review us?
Review us. We should whisper it to the audience. Review.
Please review us. Yeah, no, seriously
this
though,
like an ASMR?
subscribing. What's it called? AMSR.
ASMR. Audio center. I just know it's like, here. This would be it.
Oh my god. Sorry.
Does that help people fall asleep? All right, maybe not.
Okay, well, if you're still there,
Hopefully,
it does make
yeah.
a big difference if you can either and/or review and/or subscribe to the podcast from what we hear on the internet. So if you're cool with doing that, we would be super grateful. We'll see all of them. So if you do it, thank you.
Yeah, high five.
All right, that's it from us.
Later,
See you
y'all.
next time.